and CF the allodial system, no lord above you, right? So if you're the landlord, nobody's above you. You own it. You're the owner. Okay. So enter our another role, the rental agreement. Okay. So landlord, tenant, two roles on the stage. Enter rental agreement. Okay. Rental agreement comes running on the stage, or also called a lease agreement. These are important because now this is the glue that exists between landlord and tenant, right? It's that power that exists, that relationship that exists, is defined by this. So they can only act on stage as far as the rental agreement. Maybe it's the script, right? The rental agreement is the script. Whatever the rental agreement says, that makes the landlord and tenant run around the stage. Okay, but they're created by a contract called a rental agreement, which provides contractual rights to both parties. Okay, I put that in red because that's important. Never assume as a renter that your landlord has all the rights in a rental agreement. You as a tenant have rights. Okay, and both ways it goes. And this is kind of key. It is a temporary transfer of property. Okay, possession but not title. Okay, so it's a temporary transfer of property. Okay, all of us have engaged in a lease in our lifetime. Okay, so think about this. I'm assuming everybody in here has gone to a movie at one point or not in their life, right? When you go to a movie theater, you're actually signing a lease agreement, or you're purchasing a lease agreement. Okay, I don't know if you knew this, but movie tickets are a very unique type of lease situation, right? That movie ticket you get gives you a temporary transfer of rights to the movie theater property, right? You get to use and occupy that little room to watch a movie screening for, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever the movie is. Might run longer, but that's all you get. You get use of that little space. And then after that limited duration, you got to get the hell out of there, which means that you can't go movie hopping, right? That's why it's a very, very specific lease for a very, very specific use of area and time. Okay, it's possession but not title. You get to sit in your seat, and then you got to get the hell out and purchase another ticket. Okay, but a movie ticket is kind of a unique rental lease agreement actually. Okay, so let's kind of restructure this, and actually let's look at this first, right? So this rental agreement basically is summed up in these two arrows here, right? It connects the landlord and tenant. It gets them moving together. Okay, so let's clean up the screen here and put our key players back on top. Our three roles, we're going to add one more role right now. Okay, and in comes consideration. Ooh, okay, so consideration. What is consideration? Well, it's not being nice to somebody. Okay, okay. If you look back up on the landlord, they get title, consideration, tenant, possession, quiet enjoyment, which is actually their consideration. Okay, so consideration is something of value given up. Okay, so when a tenant rents from a landlord, that person has to give up something in order to live in the property. Okay, now normally we think money, right? But I don't want you to sort of just think that equals money. The legal term for that payment is called consideration. Most of us just call it rent, but it's actually called consideration legally. So consideration, but broadly defined, means something of value given up. Okay, it's an exchange, but it does not equal money. Okay, although I'll have to disclaim on the next line, 99% of the time it is. Okay, although 99.9% of the time it is, right? Consideration is something of value given up. Everybody has to exchange something, an opportunity cost, if you will, right? The landlord gets money, right, in order to let, if you have, just say you have a lot with two houses, you want to rent out the front house, right? So in order to give up that house in the front, you have to get something, right? So when somebody moves in there, right, your consideration is the rental stream, right? The income stream that comes to you from the rent. That's your consideration. The consideration that the tenant gets is that when the roof breaks, you're going to fix it, and that person gets to have a place to live. Okay, so that's the exchange that happens. but it's not always money. For example, if somebody's renting your mom's, or if you're living it with your parents, or you're renting your grandparents your two spare room, then in exchange for living there, right, you're doing the dishes, you're taking out the trash, you're mowing the lawn, whatever, and that's your consideration. That's what you're paying them. Really, that's the value that's given up in order for you to stay there, right? You stop doing the dishes, taking out the trash, being nice, then they're going to kick you out, right? But both parties must receive this. Okay, so questions popping up here. I just said consideration does not equal money. So if consideration does not equal money, then what the hell is rent? Okay, if you guys want to pause it and think about it, come up with the answer, scratch your heads. Here's the answer. It's a trick question. Okay, again, it's just a matter of splitting hairs. It's just really a matter of legal definitions versus practical, everyday human terminology. Rent is a specific term that applies to leases, while consideration is a general term used for all contracts. Okay. And remember, and I said this not to trick you, but to remind you that a lease is a contract. Okay, a lease is a contract. Okay, let's move on. Now, let's clean the screen again. We have all of our 4 actors on the stage. Okay, landlord, tenant, rental agreement, and something of value given up. Okay, so let's give you a few questions here and see how your knowledge is coming along. So under a lease, when does the property go back to the landlord, the owner or lessor? Okay, under a lease, when does the property go back or return to the landlord? So pause it, think about it. I'm going to give you guys the answer in 2 seconds, 1 second, at the end of the lease. Okay, so when the lease expires, it goes back from tenant to landlord. Okay, hope you guys got that. Well, next question. Let's look at this. Well, how do we know what the end of the lease is? Right? It says it goes back at the end of the lease, but how do we know what the end of the lease is? Okay, so pause it, think about it, and press play again when you think you have the answer. So I'm going to give you the answer in 2, 1. Well, it depends on the type of lease it is. Okay, it really depends. Remember, we have 3 major types of lease agreements. Okay, so each type is going to have its own sort of factor in time. Okay, so next question. A lease gives rights to both parties. Okay, that's how it's part of a definition. Gives rights to both parties. Today, where would you go to find out what your rights are in a lease? Okay, I'm not talking fictional characters. I'm not talking about 1848. I'm talking about today, this day, today. If you're renting or if you own a property that you're renting out, where would you go to find out what your rights are if you have a lease agreement? Okay, all right, I'm going to give you guys the answer, and I'm just sort of hoping in my most inner thoughts that someone out there actually knows the answer because this is really kind of important stuff. Okay, I'll give you the answer. 2, 1. Landlord Tenant Code and HRS 521. Okay, so if you guys can go, everyone has access to the Landlord Tenant Code, Hawaii Landlord Tenant Code, and HRS is a Hawaii Revised Statutes. That's the law, 521, Chapter 521. And you can find this at the DCCA website. Okay, just kind of giving this for your general knowledge base. DCCA is the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. Okay, go on their website. You can download these in PDF form, or you can find the Hawaii Revised Statutes on the Landlord Tenant Code. Okay, so let's look over these 3 types of leasehold tenancy that I'd mentioned. First one is a periodic tenancy, month to month, week to week, year to year. Okay, these are very common. A lot of people rent a place on a month to month basis, a year to year basis, whatever that is, and it's most commonly known as a month to month rental agreement. It's automatically renewed unless notice is given. There's no specific termination date necessary. Okay, so these are pretty common in places that you rent. So here's a question. Okay, and I'm hoping somebody gets this right. If you are a tenant, How many days notice do you need to give your landlord to move out? Okay. Answer is coming now. 28 days. Okay, I hope somebody got that right. Okay, 28 days notice if you need to move out. Okay, another question. The reverse. If you're a landlord, how many days notice do you need to give your tenant to move out?